it, I was reading it, and I was looking at it, and I thought, this thing includes so many various cultural types, but none are really specifically talking about the people.
Hey, how's it going, Rick? Good to see you.
Hey!
So you guys are talking about that, the House Bill 1192?
Yeah, we were talking about it. How it doesn't speak specifically to American and Native issues.
Yeah, it's the inclusion of American minorities in teaching civil government, right? It puts all of us in one big bowl, assuming that we're all the same. Clumping us all together, it's like a Band-Aid fix.
Hey, Phil! How's it going?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Good to see you. Oh. How's everyone? I heard you guys talking about the new House bill. Kind of got overlooked a little bit again, didn't we? I read that the House bill is it's only funding about $30,000 and covers like all 8 groups. Puts history and the culture, that social contribution to civil government like we have not contributed in any other area outside of those main points.
Yeah, I agree. We all have issues that need to be addressed. But like I mentioned, it's clumping us all together like a Band-Aid fix. We have documentation of our mathematic and scientific contributions. But again, this isn't new to us, just to be forgotten. How do we make them understand that we matter?
You know, we need to educate not only our youth, but our parents, our adults, in the curriculum that brings our culture to the forefront. Indian education, will it do this?
What does HB 1992
mean to you?
Good evening. Welcome. Hope you're enjoying the food from Donnell-Kay, American Indian eatery that's known worldwide. Thank you, Ben. Welcome everybody to the Denver Indian Center. And often when I have groups in here, I say, welcome to Indian country. We'll talk about that later here in a second. The Denver Indian Center, for those of you that's the first time here, you're one of the first events that we're experiencing on our brand new floor. Okay. This building was built in 1947, and it was feeling some aches and pains, just like all of us do. And so through a generous donation from our community, in the next few months, we're going to be doing some upgrades and renovations to bring about more pride and awareness to our community so they have a place to come to and they can enjoy it. So we're glad we're opening our doors to you tonight and welcome you here. Denver Indian Center's been here since 1983. Actually, the Denver Indian Center was formed in 1983, and this building was occupied by the center in 1985. Since then, we've been serving the American Indian community in various areas of education, with a foundation of education, whether it's around self-determination, empowerment to our youth, our community, with respect to economic, health, social, all the well-being factors of living a balanced and harmonious life. So I want to welcome everybody here tonight. We're going to be talking about education, which again is the foundation of the mission statement of the Denver Indian Center. So I want to also recognize one of our sister agencies who's here sharing information, the Denver Indian Family Resource Center. So if you get a moment, stop by, pick up some information. They serve our community as well. One thing we believe in is collaboration. If we're going to get things done, we've got to work with all of our community. And so I'm happy to see representatives from different organizations here tonight and different walks of life. So I won't go much further other than saying, glad you're here. And if you have any questions, go to our Facebook, Denver Indian Center Inc., or our website, Denver Indian Center. And just give us a call or stop by. I encourage staff, I was going to say faculty, I encourage staff to make the coffee hot and strong. So you come by and have a cup of coffee. And again, Rick Waters, co-executive director of the Denver Indian Center. And I know she'll have acknowledgement and recognition later, but our chairman of the board, a long-standing member and person that is responsible for a lot of the activities and the ongoing of the Denver Indian Center is Rose McGuire. I'd like for her to go ahead and stand this time, just to acknowledge her. I also want to acknowledge another person that I've been involved with for a number of years through a scholarship program, and I don't think he talks as much of a Texas twang and Oklahoma drawl as I do. But Joel Smith, who is also a board member of the Denver Indian Center, is here tonight. Joel. And my last comment is, I'm half Kiowa, half Cherokee, and we're talking about Indian history and culture. For those of you that remember 5 civilized tribes, which ones was that? And of course, the Kiowas, we argue with the Comanches all the time about who knocked the most baggage. So I tell people I'm half wild, half civilized. Don't take that back. We're not going to include that in the history books. Just want to let you know. Welcome again, and I'm going to turn this over to a student, Rosie Molina. And she'll come up. She is going to offer a land acknowledgement. And this is something for the last couple of years that's happening around the world in terms of indigenous groups and the land acknowledgement of where they're from. So without further ado, Rosie is a Seminole, Choctaw, Creek, 3 of the 5 civilized tribes, from JFK, where she's a junior. So Rosie.
Sorry, I have to see what I'm stand over here so you guys can see me. We would like to acknowledge the native history of the Denver region in Colorado more broadly, and recognize the Southern Ute Indigenous Nation and the Ute Mountain Nation. The land that Denver sits on and originally belonged to the Arapaho Nation, as laid out in the 1851 Treaty of Fort Laramie. When gold was discovered in the late 1850s, white settlers arrived in the area in large numbers and began asserting their right to the land, leading to the Treaty of Fort Wise in 1861, and cessation of land and by some tribal leaders. In 1864, the Sand Creek Massacre resulted in the deaths of hundreds of Arapaho and Cheyenne people, and soon after, these nations would be relocated out of Colorado. Other nations native to Colorado include the Apache, Comanche, Shoshone, and Ute. The latter includes the Southern Ute Indian Tribe and Ute Mountain Ute Tribe, federally recognized tribes that have their current headquarters in Ignacio, Colorado, and Toledo. Sorry about that. Respectively, these groups have historically lived in the southern and western portions of the state. In DPS, we have over 1,000 Native students representing over 70 tribes. At JFK, we have 22 Native students from over a dozen tribes. By acknowledging that we are standing on Native land, please recognize the students you are all called upon to support.
They're so quiet and stoic. I want to acknowledge the Donnell-Kay Foundation for the inspiration of bringing this meeting together tonight. So I know we have representatives from the foundation here. I know we have workers and leadership. Will you all stand so we can acknowledge you right now? Donnell-Kay Foundation. They have a beautiful office downtown, but they get down in the nitty-gritty. When they came down here today, they were the ones actually setting up all these places, putting all the tablecloths out. So they just don't sit up in their ivory tower. They come down here with beautiful clothes. So we appreciate it. I'm not sure what the next thing is on the agenda, so I'm going to turn it over to who knows. We'll do this Indian style. You know, I tease my colleagues, you know, I give presentations, and believe it or not, I do give presentations to groups, people throughout the year. And one of the questions I always get is, what do you like to be called? American Indian, Native American, Indian? And I have a long answer, but I tell them, you know, as long as you are respectful of what you address. Now, Colorado, you've got a little bit of a difficulty here because you got a lot of people that call themselves Native. I'll just leave it at that.
Hello, thank you. My name is Phil Gover. I'm the Acts 12 Native Youth Advocate, along with Jennifer Wilson. If you could just go quick. You're going to give me that. I will quit. We asked a few of our students to send in a video, and with the help of Kelly Holmes with Native Max Magazine, she compiled some of those videos into a format. Now, we have only so much of an internet access, so I'm wondering how this is going to run. Go ahead and get this started. But we asked them a few questions about how they feel about the schools. We asked them to identify who they were, and then also how they feel about the school as towards their own identity of who they are as Native people.
think that in my school, my culture isn't represented within the curriculum. A lot of the times, it's just one small unit that gets passed over real fast, and that's usually when we're talking about the colonization of America, so it's not even a positive lesson. It's more of a sad, this is what happened, let's move on to the next Thanksgiving lesson. One thing I would like to see within my classrooms would be first a land acknowledgement of whatever classroom we're in, of what land we reside on, because this was all native land and we need to be aware of that. And then secondly, not only the colonization of America, but what we did to make Turtle Island successful in how we survived without oil, without everything that white America stands for now. Having cultural learning within our school system is very vital, not only to the students, but to the upcoming society. We are the future and we need to know how to go with an open mind. We have to know how to accept every culture. We have to know whose land that we're on. And if we don't have that, then we're just walking through a school system lost. Being a senior in DPS, I've gone to school for 13 years, including kindergarten. And every year we go over the lesson, and it's up to me to teach my peers when it should be. And then that just makes me feel like I have to do something that I'm not supposed to do. Like, I'm there to learn, and I shouldn't be there to teach others. Although, like, I have no problem teaching people, like, about my culture and how strong we are. It should not be a student's job to stand up in front of their class to do that.
My name is Axel Wolf. I'm Ponca and Ojibwe and some other tribes, but I can't think of them right now. I go to Morgan Middle School. In my new school, we don't do a lot of stuff on natives, but we did this one unit and it was accurate, but at my old school, there was just these books that would like call natives like savages and stuff, and it was just like, that's why I didn't like that school, I guess. I feel like there's a lot of ignorant people in the world, and that people don't know about other cultures because they didn't grow up around them.
Hello, my name is Leah Corinne. I am Apache, Navajo, and New Mountain Ute. I am a freshman at high school, and my culture is briefly mentioned in school because mostly people talk about how British was fighting with the colonists, and all these things about how Britain just came to America and how Native Americans helped fight war, but they really don't talk about what actually happened. But in only one of my classes, my teacher actually explained that many people hurt and killed and did other things to Native Americans. But that was only one out of many teachers I had over the years, almost 9, 10, yeah. And I believe that schools should actually teach people, or the students, that Native Americans still do exist. Because when I told someone I was Native American, they're like, oh my god, you live in a teepee? And all these bizarre questions about all these stereotypes of Native Americans have. So I believe that if we teach more about Native Americans, and that they're still here, and that they don't live in teepee, they live in a normal home or apartment, more kids will understand about different cultures and how different events reflect on us and how we really don't like question about the culture because sometimes it makes us embarrassed or they'll say something like, how do you say hello? How do you say mom? How do you say grandma? How do you say dog? How do you say any words? And I'm like, I really can't tell you that because you won't really understand. And they'll ask like negative questions like, how do you say like a bad word or like a stereotype for another person? And I'm like, we really don't have those words because we really don't talk like that at all. We'll just say something brief. And then another thing is we should teach them because they should be more educated about different cultures that live in the United States. Yeah. I go to the motion.
Once again, I want to thank Kelly Holmes for getting that together. All I could do was tell students to please see the end. Now that I've been going back there.
Good evening, my name is Terry Bissett. I am Donnell-Kay and Anishinaabe from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I am the founder and head of school of American Indian Academy of Denver. We are a brand new charter school at Denver Public Schools that will be opening in fall 2020 with grades 6, 7, and 8. And I want to thank you all for being here. And I want to also acknowledge we do have some elected officials in the audience, and I would like to thank them also for being here. We've got Angela Colbion with the DPS School Board. DPS School Board. And also Val Flores with the State Board of Education. I want to thank them for being here. It's really, really important that we have decision makers and those people that are in those positions to actually do something to make change. Oh, I'm sorry. Serena? Okay, Serena Gutierrez is also going to be here as well. She's a state legislator. Okay. And I want to just point out that one of the things that our committee wanted to do and make sure is that we had student voice in the room, and so that was the reason for the video, because it's really important for all of us to remember that they're the reason why we're here, they're the reason why we do the work that we do. And so I just want to acknowledge that. I am going to be introducing Mandy Smoker Broadus, and I see that she's getting her computer set up, so I'll try to add a little bit. Mandy is a Assiniboine and Sioux from the state of Montana, and she was the Indian Education Director for the state of Montana for, I believe, 12 years. She now does advocacy work in Indian education nationwide, and she's worked with many states on their efforts to represent and to include our education and our ways of knowing our belief systems and also our history into school systems across the country. It's really, really important to remember that Indian education is U.S. education. And every child in this country deserves to know the truth and to receive accurate information on not only history, but also our current contributions to not only this country, but also globally as well. So it's really, that's kind of why we're here, I guess. So we'll give her just another minute here. It looks like the PowerPoint's not playing nice. Okay, our school, we actually just signed a lease last week. We're going to be located at 1865 West Mississippi Avenue. I'm Sina Harjo and also Angela. You Eagle is here, if you guys can give a wave. I would not be able to do anything that I do without the help of my board and also many, many community members. We also recently hired an assistant principal, Gerald Buntour, and you saw him. He's the one that wrote the script. Our signature learning experience at American Indian Academy is going to be indigenized STEAM. So we are going to be a science, technology, engineering, art, and math school. And what I often tell people is most STEAM and STEM programs are focused on preparing children for jobs that we don't even know are going to, jobs that have never been created yet. And although that is a focus of ours, our STEAM is somewhat a little bit different in that we are looking to reclaim the genius of our ancestors. We have always been scientists, we've always been innovators, and always been academics. And it's important for our children to understand that. And so that is really what our reclamation is really a big focus of ours. We will be offering some transportation, so if we have parents in the room, we are available if you have any questions about the school. And we will be having office hours and also community events at Asmark Park Shopping Center, which is where we're going to be located. There was one other thing that I was going to say, and I'm trying to think. I didn't prepare this long of a speech, as you can tell. I did want to point out some of the things that are on the table. NIEA and NCAI and also WEN Collective. WEN Collective is a local foundation here in Denver. Do we have anybody from WEN in the room? Okay. They actually printed these reports. This report, Becoming Visible, just came out the last couple of weeks. And WEN was kind enough to print out the reports for us so that we can take home. And it is a report, really an analysis on nationwide efforts around Indian education state by state. And it also has a toolkit, I believe, in the back that gives some suggestions and some hands-on kind of things to do to make things better in each of your states. And also there's a brochure from our school as well. And if you haven't looked at the program, there are bios of each of the panelists, and we're going to have a bio for Mandy. And also, I believe there's a thing for notes. I think we're going to have an evaluation at the end. Yeah, the evaluation is not included. So those are the things that are on the table. That's always really stressful. Good evening. It smells incredible in this room. It looks beautiful. And it just feels like a very, very good space. And that's due entirely to all of you and to your collective energy and for showing up on a Monday evening. Yes, the food is great, awesome. But to talk about and dig into a topic that I think is really important to a lot of us. So I'm Amanda Smoker-Roddice. I am from Montana. And I'll talk a little bit about Montana's work related to Indian education for all. We are very fortunate, not by any effort on my own, but because we had trailblazers 25 to 30 years ago that fought tirelessly to ensure that Indian education was taught in all of our schools across Montana. And so I stood on the shoulders of giants in Montana in implementing that law and making sure that accurate and authentic information was being taught and shared about our students. to thank again Terry and Matt and everyone at Donnell-Kay, the Denver Indian Center for hosting us. It takes a lot of effort to get something like this together, and I just acknowledge that they did it with a good heart and really good intentions, and that matters to us, I think, a lot. So we're gonna, I'm an outsider to your community. I hope by the end of this you'll feel like maybe I've just tried to share a bit of what I've seen around the country, what I've been able to listen and learn related to this really important topic. But really, this is really personal, deeply personal work to you all. And I know that, and I sense that. And it's personal across multiple generations, right? We're talking about our relatives, our ancestors that have gone on before us. So it's a continuum that we have been having to live within and often struggle against. But the reality is that the thing that gives me the most hope and the greatest sense of purpose about this is, even today, I heard stories of struggle, but also stories of resilience about your students who attend schools in this area and in this region. And it's not easy. Oftentimes, it feels like, you're probably the lone person that's trying to make a difference in a classroom or in a certain school within the district. And I know that's a heavy burden to carry, especially for parents and families and caregivers, but also for our students, because they shouldn't have to be the ones educating teachers about us, right? So I know that, and I know it's a big burden, and I know that that's what makes this space and this time sacred, because we're talking about trying to change an entire system that was not designed for us and consistently works against helping to lift us up, helping us to feel stronger and more purposeful as Indian people in this country. So, there's a sense of urgency about this work, and I just want you to know that I acknowledge all of that. And so why do we do this work? So these are 4 of the reasons why I do it, and you have all of yours either in this room or in the child care room or back at home or elsewhere, right? These are, one child is mine and the other are 2 nieces and a nephew. And I always share this slide because all of these kids have lived with me at different points in their lives, except for my own son, who's lived with me his whole life. And that's pretty common, I think, in Indian country, that sometimes kids move around. And sometimes they might live with a particular relative and then go back to mom and dad, or they might move on to grandma's. And what schools would define as transiency. And for them, for schools, that's absolutely seen as a deficit. But in Indian communities and in Indian families, it's more of a strength. It's more of an opportunity. And so that's the way I always talk to schools, is some of the ways, the lens with which you perceive our communities and the way we do things and the way we respond to situations is not fair. And it's not accurate, and it doesn't describe who we are and how we sometimes, share our children and see that as definitely, again, an asset and not a deficit. So and a lot of school principals are like, what are you talking about? I'm like, yes, it's true. It might not be the background that you come from, it might not be the lens with which you view our students and our families, but it is absolutely true. So I just have to set the stage a little bit when talking about Indian education, because really there are essentially 2 interwoven components here. We could talk about Native education for all, which is teaching about American Indians, and it's absolutely interwoven with Native student outcomes, so teaching for American Indian students. And let me describe that just a little bit. So we know here on the bottom, Native education for all, we have to work harder to improve education about American Indians in this country. And some of it's in that report that's on your table. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some data that really, I mean, we all know it, we live it, but for the nation to see some of what Americans think about American Indians and how wrong and how false it is really important to have at your fingertips and be able to use in really any realm that you're involved in. So we have to work to correct the damaging narrative that exists about us. We have to rewrite and re-describe who we are and what we want other people to know about us. We have to, again, reclaim that story, and we have to rewrite a curriculum. Because the reality is, what you buy on a bookshelf or from a website, 95% of the time is going to be filled with inaccuracies, stereotypes, misconceptions, and just downright false information. And so if we don't get new materials into the hands of teachers, that cycle, I don't care how many times you review the curriculum. No offense against the bill, but that's just going to keep perpetuating. And so there has to be another intermediary step there to help fix that. And we'll talk about that, sorry. So the other part to this is I just want to say about educators and as a teacher, it's not that they don't want to do the right thing, it's just they were taught the bad information too. And so I know when they call upon us as parents or students to help them, right? Come on, help us teach about Indians and talk about Indians. It comes from a place of their own insecurity and a lack of confidence in material that they're not comfortable teaching or talking about. And so again, that's why creating materials and curriculum is really, really important. And a lot of people, I'll talk more about this later, but want to throw out the local control card. I can tell you in Montana and Oregon, where I've done extensive work, writing curriculum and making sure that it's legislatively enabled, it can be done. So we have a secondary, talking a lot. Okay, we have a secondary purpose in Indian education, obviously. It's related to the bottom because if our kids see accurate portrayals that honor who they are in school and in their classrooms, they're going to do better. They're going to feel better. And success rates across all those realms where, you know, a lot of the outcomes is really negative are absolutely going to increase. But really, it's the right, and it's a treaty right, really, for our students to thrive in educational systems that meet their needs on a daily basis. Not just something that you bring out around Thanksgiving or, you know, Indigenous Peoples Month, but that we are redesigning schools and classrooms that honor and respect who they are and where they come from. And I don't say this lightly, but we're trying to do this work. What Terry and others in Oklahoma City and Albuquerque and South Dakota are trying to do by recreating new school systems is foundational. Because every structure that we have been forced to be a part of in any educational setting since colonization has not been designed for our young people. And in fact, it's been intentionally built, they're oppressive structures that are intentionally built to either indoctrinate us, assimilate us, or render us invisible and powerless. So if I'm a young student or I'm a parent, why would I ever want to put my kid into a situation like that daily that does not recognize them, does not see them, doesn't honor them, and doesn't lift them up to be a more successful American Indian person? And it absolutely impacts tribal sovereignty. It impacts, you know, so many realms of leadership and policy. And so we have to, I applaud people that have the courage, like here in Denver, to think about new models and to make those adjustments for our kids. Because the truth is, we had perfectly honed systems of educating our young people. We had been doing it for thousands of years perfectly. Our kids knew exactly what their place was in a community. They knew their role, their function, their family. They knew the land, they knew their language. They knew the universe, they knew the stars. And we did that daily. And when we were forced into a westernized conveyor belt model, we lost so much. But the reality is we're still here, and we can still, because, you know, thank God our ancestors fought so hard to retain so much that we can still build upon those traditional pieces and take what we like from the westernized system and do something new and something different and something more powerful for us. So I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about some research this evening. I'm going to talk a little bit about some data. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some other states and how they're approaching this work in hopes, again, that it might inspire, it might fire you up, it might get you thinking about new and innovative ways to approach Indian education. Again, I'm really about reclaiming this space on behalf of our young people. And I always really work hard to be strengths-based in this work, to decolonize data so that we're not just relying upon a deficits model, that we're not just relying upon something that some researcher wanted to learn about us and came in and studied us from the outside, right? This is about us. This is about questions we have for our own communities and for our own kids, and it's about finding solutions and using data and information and other stories from around the country to do that. Does that sound like what you all thought we were here for a bit? Okay. Sorry, if you walk out, I won't be offended. Okay, we'll go back. Sorry, I gotta set this up. So, Reclaiming Native Truth is an amazing project. I encourage you to go look it out. Many of the people that were involved in this report, Illuminative and others, were also essential to this project. This was a $2 million research project over the course of several years. And they went and they surveyed as many Americans as possible around the country. And they wanted to see, what do people think and know about American Indians? What are their perceptions? And how does that contrast sometimes with the reality? So I'm just going to show you a bit of this, because this explains to you why better teaching about American Indians is absolutely necessary, and it's long, long overdue. So, again, a dominant narrative about American Indians absolutely translates into public policy and opinion about us, which impacts all realms, from healthcare to education, just about anything, and it has an impact. Obviously, there's a lack of representation, and there's also erasure that creates bias. So, Crystal Echohawk, who led this initiative, really had some profound, things to say about it in the end. But basically, that there are so many people out there that don't know us and don't know accurately who we are, that they're not willing to be our allies or advocates. They're not willing to jump on board with us for our social justice issues and other causes because they have so many misunderstandings. And then lastly, that invisibility, she believes, continues to be a modern form of racism. So here's a few of the survey findings, and again, this is just to show you that most Americans are really out of touch and off base when it comes to American Indians. So almost 60% agreed that the United States committed genocide against American Indians. So think about your neighborhood. 6 out of 10 people on your block believe in the atrocities and terrible things that were intentionally poured upon American Indian people. 36% thought that American Indians experienced significant discrimination. Wow. Okay. Why don't you follow me into Kmart sometime? Right? Bias against American Indians depends on region. Again, this isn't going to be anything that surprises folks in this room. By and large, greatest bias shown among those who live nearest a reservation. How many people have lived on a border town? It ain't pretty, huh? There's a lot of conflict that there is a lot of, in border towns, changing and shifting identities and politics, and it creates a lot of tension in a lot of border town communities that are near a reservation. People have dual ideas about Indians. Either we are totally impoverished because, you know, the one place that everybody likes to go to write a magazine article or do a news broadcast is where. Or that we just have so much money, you know, it's just falling out of my hair right now. I wish I didn't have student loan debt, right? But we do. We pay taxes, right? So there's all these just misconceptions. That we, you know, we're caretakers of Mother Nature and Mother Earth. The environment is our cause. But then also that our reservations are really trashy. Most people didn't understand tribal sovereignty. How about that as a shocker? I've been building a curriculum for the state of Oregon. We introduced tribal sovereignty at the 4th grade level. We talk about it again at the 8th grade level. We're going to talk about it again at the 10th grade level. You can never talk about it enough. And you can never, there's so many nuances, and there are so many contemporary issues that you can bring in to highlight tribal sovereignty, that it's not just this concept, you know, that evolved 100 years ago. It's actually living out purposefully today. And then, of course, we're all the same, right? We're homogenous. We all live in teepees, like my tribe. You know, we all roamed the plains in search of buffalo. Where might that narrative come from? Dances with Wolves, and a lot of the movies and film that are out there about American. So, again, this is, when I give presentations, you're not, you know, by and large the audience for this, but I have to really like drive home, like, why this matters. Like, it's important, not just because of that, but it's important because culture and community and diversity are assets. And if you just teach, if your school just functions homogeneously, that is not at all inclusive. It's not allowing a diversity of opinion and thought, and it sounds really boring. Personal connections give us perspective, engage attention, and help us make meaning. There's a ton of new brain research about cultural responsiveness and why it's so important, especially for American Indian youth. I mean, you know, teaching about American Indians can increase compassion. It can reduce prejudice, right? It can help us see each other in new and meaningful ways. Greater inclusion and participation. Can't tell you how many urban schools I've been to around the country, and when I walk into an advanced mathematics class and see not one person of color in there, and no one is asking themselves why. And this last, I've already touched on this a little bit. These are systemic structures and conditions that we have to intentionally challenge. And I think that's part of the reason why you're all here today, you know, engaging in a journey of intentionally challenging structures that are damaging, that don't meet our needs, round peg, square hole, and that need to be rethought. So when I'm talking to school administrators, the thing they always say is, well, where's the research? You know, we really need somebody to have like studied this, even though we're like, duh, like we know this, we experience this, but okay, all right, you want some research. There's a ton out there. These are some of my favorite pieces about why teaching about American Indians is in any group is so important. Students feel a greater sense of purpose and connection to what they're learning, and they're more motivated to do well. Surprisingly, if you acknowledge a student and who they are, and their history, and their language, and their identity, and build upon that, and shoot them out into all sorts of new knowledge bases, wouldn't that make you feel good? Instead, if you show up and they tell you things that you know are not true, that they're not what your grandparents or elders or others in your community have been telling you about yourself, fight or flight, right? Discipline disparities exist for a reason, and I really believe this is a part of it. And this is really good because thinking about the ways we communicate in various communities, again, being strengths-based, those are assets. Being able to code switch and talk in different settings is awesome, and it's a strength. And yet, if communities and schools don't necessarily communicate, and families don't communicate in the same way, and transfer information, value those patterns between home and school, obviously, you might probably end up being more, you'd be unenthusiastic about that communication and about what you want to do. I just talked a lot, and you guys could have read those 2 paragraphs. I'm sorry. I'm restating them. I'll be briefer on these. Okay, so the top one refers to research that would apply to all students. Learning about American Indian students gives perspective, and it's really, really valuable to learn different ways and different viewpoints that go beyond your own cultural or social experiences, right? And we don't do enough of that. Again, we tend to teach from one lens, and it happens to often be the lens from which we are oriented, and from which we grew out of. And then this last one, I think I've talked a little bit about it already, but Stephanie Freiberg, Dr. Stephanie Freiberg is at the University of Washington, and she's doing a lot to study these narratives, these inaccuracies and stereotypes, and how they actually impact American Indian students, and how fundamental that is, and that they absolutely perpetuate trauma. So I encourage you to look her up. And I always add to this, not only do you have narratives and stereotypes, but you're actually often rendered invisible. You're entirely left out of the discussion. You're left out of the curriculum and the teaching experience, and just how damaging that is. So this is the report that's on your desk. On your desk. Turn to page 5. They say 45 minutes. I'm like, crap, I'm gonna go and turbo mode here. Okay, so this is a really wonderful report. It was compiled by WEND, by Illuminative, by the National Congress of American Indians, by the National Education Association, and my colleague and I were the researchers and writers of this report. So what we wanted to do, what NCAI asked us to do, was look out across states and see what they were doing to teach about American Indians, and to be able to analyze that in hopes that in certain places, like Denver, Colorado, you could use this information to find leverage points to advance the work in your community. Okay, so you can't read that, obviously, that tiny little square. But just so you know, 87% of state history standards, this is just general information, don't talk about American Indians after 1900. And this is just across the entire country, all 50 states. 27 states make no mention of a single American Indian in their K-12. This is, again, a big picture. So then we said, okay, well, let's dig down a little bit deeper. That was just kind of a landscape analysis. We did a lit review. We said, okay, let's go to the 35 states that have federally recognized tribes. I understand that is not fair. We should have gone to all states because America is Indian country, and everybody has an obligation to be teaching about Indians. But we had to start somewhere. So we started with 35 states. Hawaii, we also included Hawaii and Illinois, even though Illinois doesn't have, Hawaiians are not federally recognized, and Illinois does not have a federally recognized tribe. But there's some really cool things going on in Chicago, so NCAI wanted us to include them. Of those 35 states, only 28 responded. And these are people that used to work for the state, like Mandy used to work for the state of Montana. I don't know why I'm talking about myself in the third person. I used to work in the state of Montana, and I was the director of Indian education. And many states, I'll show you in a minute, have a position somewhat like that, or they have a part-time position. It might not be a director, it might be a lower level position, but at least there's somebody there trying to, keep everybody accountable. So those are the people that responded to this survey. We did, as I mentioned, the lit review, we interviewed people, and then again, we took a survey from at least one person in each state. What we looked at were efforts to develop Native curriculum in a state, any policies or laws. We looked at staff and funding that's dedicated to Indian education. We looked at tribal nation engagement and development of Native American curriculum. And then we looked specifically at experiences with these efforts, successes, challenges, barriers. So that's what you'll find if you dig into that. So some big picture findings. Of those 28 states, 90% of them said they have current efforts underway to improve the quality of and access to Native American curriculum. That's pretty significant. However, very, very few mandated curriculum. And I can tell you the states that actually mandate curriculum. Montana, Hawaii, Oregon, Washington, and then we kind of get to some gray area. A majority of the states surveyed indicated that Native education is included in their content standards. But again, very few actually mandate specific curriculum. And it's most, obviously this isn't going to be a surprise, it's most likely to be included in state social studies standards. Because we are relics of the past, right? We're not still contributing to America. We don't still write books and draw paintings, build policy, right? So it's easier to relegate us and easier to teach about as a social studies content area. We found that many nations, more nations, are creating their own tribally specific curriculum. It's actually happening in Colorado. Tribal education departments and tribal governments want more inclusion in the education of their citizens. I would say done. Okay, so only a third of those states that responded to the survey actually allocate funding to build American Indian education curriculum. Can't see up there, Hawaii, Idaho, Montana, New Mexico, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Oregon, Washington, and Wisconsin. All of them, except for Oklahoma, invest public dollars, over $100,000 annually to develop curriculum to be out in schools. One that will be, there's one that we just learned about recently in the state of Minnesota. The Shakopee tribe is giving $5 million to develop curriculum statewide. I counter by saying the state also needs to make a public investment to demonstrate to the entire state. Yeah, the tribal investment is important, but still, as a state, we're sending a very clear message across the educational spectrum that this is really important. So FTE, the number of staff that you might have working in a state education agency. I can tell you in Montana, at the height of our work doing this, I had 14 people working. I had over $2 million every biennium. I could have 6 people writing curriculum and training teachers in how to use it, both in person and online. I could have another batch of people going out and providing Title III services. I could have another batch of people going out and providing literacy or mathematics supports. So staff really, really matters. And that's again why a public investment is really, really important. I was totally unaware that Hawaii had 16 people. I mean, Hawaii is one big school district, know if you know that, but it's really cool. And they're doing some amazing work in Indigenous education. They're like rocking it, especially with their language revitalization. They are something we should all hope to be like. Montana follows. Right now, so we have 8 staff, like I said, again, that are dedicated towards building curriculum. New Mexico has 7. Oklahoma has 6, which just recently happened, but unfortunately in Oklahoma, that's a 2-year appropriation, and they have to go back to the legislature and you know, beg to get the money back to continue to have those staff. Or in most cases, if it's just legislatively bound, then that just exists. Then followed by Washington, Minnesota, Oregon is about to increase because they just got a lot of money from their state legislature, over $4 million to do this work. I'm going to talk about Oregon in a minute. I don't know how Colorado, Wyoming, and Connecticut, I don't know what a half-time, a quarter-time, or an eighth of a time position could possibly function. It just almost seems gratuitous, because you can't possibly, what can you accomplish, right? And Georgina Owen from Colorado, yay, you're awesome. But you have a Herculean effort before you with, you know, very, very limited time dedicated from your agency to do this important work. So I just acknowledge that. And when you look at this, again, doesn't it seem not right? Right? It seems wrong. So again, this is a tool that we hope, you know, we can use in the future to advocate for more staff positions to be able to really advance it. This is a hard one. I'm sorry the text is so small, but I'll read the little bubbles to you there. So this is the states that include Native education content in standards and require curriculum, so standards and curriculum, right? So we tell teachers this is what students should be able to know and do by certain grade levels, but how you teach, whatever you teach to get them there is cool. But actually when it comes to American Indians, we're going to tell you what to teach. Those are the states that are in the dark brown. Oh, I forgot about Maine and Florida. Sorry. Okay, so states that include Native education content and standards. Again, so you might say when you're teaching in English language arts, you're teaching students about primary source documents, you might say you could use treaties. That could be an example for a teacher. How many teachers do you think are going to see that standard and say, wow, God, I gotta go learn about some treaties, right? It's a tough sell and a tough lift. There are teachers that do it, and they're awesome, but it's a lot. So there are states that require Native education to be taught in the K-12 system, but they don't necessarily have a specific curriculum. Those are a lighter brown that you can't really see. This is not a good slide because I know the colors are bad. There are the states that were not included in the landscape analysis that are that lightest color, and then states that do not include Native education content and standards and don't require a curriculum are those states in the middle. So we had all this survey information, really good stuff, and what we did was what NCAI, the National Congress of American Indians, they said, you know what, we really want to kind of come up with some sort of a barometer. So let's set some criteria around what a high implementation state would look like, and what a medium implementation state would look like, and what a low implementation state would look like. And if you want to learn about that methodology, it's in the report. I don't talk about it because it's kind of boring. But anyway. You can see Colorado is in the medium level of implementation. Does that surprise anyone? Surprises you? Then it's think there are a couple of reasons for that. Georgina can chime in with me here if she'd like. There is a fantastic tribally specific curriculum in this state. There aren't in many others. So the youth curriculum boosted the score, certainly. That there is some FTE boosted the score some, because in these other states over here, in California, think about it, there's more Indian tribes in California than anywhere else in the United States. Not even withstanding Los Angeles, they have 0 people in their state that are doing anything with the education. So those are just a couple of the factors that Colorado and some barriers. A barrier is that tribal nations are often not included in the writing specific curriculum. That is not a barrier in Colorado, so again, that's something to highlight and to be positive about. Now we just need teachers to start teaching the youth curriculum. And how do we get to that place, right? Other barriers are lack, again, of adequate funding. I hope I've made the case about why funding really, really matters. Local control. Again, by and large, across this country, we will set a standard for a teacher in science and say, kids by 4th grade, they need to be able to know this is where we want them to be, right? And then a teacher gets to plug in, not whatever, you know, they get to choose how they instruct to get the teacher to that level, or the student to that place. The best thing I heard about how to work against that in Indian education was the superintendent of Oregon, which is making a huge investment, writing statewide curriculum and tribal curriculum. He said, we have to write curriculum. Because if we don't, our teachers will continue to teach, to write curriculum and mandate it. Because if we don't, our teachers will continue to teach the same bad material that they were taught. And so this is no time to mess around, because teachers don't have the time, the influence, and sometimes the capacity to go in and rewrite sections of their curriculum to include American Indians. I wish they did. I wish they had time for a lot of things. I wish they got paid $50,000 more a year. I wish, they had better benefits packages. I wish lots of things. But the reality is that it can't be done unless we hand them something. And you have to give them good tools that they feel are reliable, that are research-based, that tribes sometimes approve of, that gives them greater confidence to step into an arena that sometimes makes them feel insecure and makes them feel not confident about themselves as a teacher, right? So we worked really hard in Montana with our state teachers union to be supportive of this effort, and that was one of the reasons we've been able to be successful. Other things, lack of professional development. Also, there's a huge question about assessments and evaluation of efforts once they're underway. And then again, just a need to expand beyond social studies and history and content. Opportunities. So some of the things that have happened around the country or are happening. Wow, now you have a fancy one. I'm getting my timeline. The first one was like scrawls, and then I have nice printing. So you can have state legislation that mandates collaboration. That's happening in some states between states and tribes. You can have state legislation that empowers states to write curriculum. You can have state education agencies develop culturally responsive guidelines for districts. That's happening in Colorado somewhat. And then you can have tribally specific curriculum development. And that's really interesting because tribes are like, you know what? We just can't wait for this state to get it together. We just have to create something. But then the trick is, again, how do you get it into the hands of teachers who can use it? So in the back of this report, there are some really great tools. You can look more deeply at what's going on in your state. It has strategies and ideas for mobilizing whether that be among a community like this, whether it be among a parent group, state legislators, whatever it might be. And then it talks about developing curriculum for your state. Okay, I'm flying through this, I promise. Okay, let's go. So state-specific work. Montana, so we have a law, it's in our constitution, you have to teach about American Indians. It was unfunded forever until a bunch of school districts got together and they sued our state. And they said, you're not funding education adequately. And they said, the state said, you're right. And our Supreme Court said, and you never funded Indian education for all. So our state gave money to schools and to our state education agency to do a better job. That was the fastest I have ever talked about Montana. My mentor, Denise Juneau, would be upset with me. This is what it says in our Constitution, and I just put it up there because I think it's beautiful language. It's the goal of the people to establish an educational system that will develop the full potential of everybody. The state recognizes the distinct and unique cultural heritage of American Indians. It's committed in its educational goals to the preservation of their cultural integrity. And that is really the bedrock of everything. Oregon, I can't show you this video, but later on I encourage you to Google tribal history, shared history in Oregon, and you will get a lovely 5-minute clip that tells you from the perspective of a superintendent, of a student, of a teacher, of a parent, why this work matters. And in Oregon, they don't call it Native Education for All, they call it tribal history, shared history. And it's a remarkable investment, like I said, $4 million, statewide lesson plans, tribally specific lesson plans, and it's awesome. Colorado resources, you do have the Ute curriculum that's available. Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs, I believe there is somebody here who has served on this commission. Hello. I was doing my research about Colorado and I was like, this seems like a commission that could help get this done. So anyway, this is just part of what they're supposed to do, right? And so if people want to pass legislation, they are a sounding board and could help advocate for something to happen down the road. This is the performance that we had to start off our evening. This is the House Bill 19-1192, the inclusion of American, I don't like that word, in teaching civil government. We are not a minority. However, it could open, it's hopefully opened the door a little bit to have more discussions about why this is important. You know, don't know, every 10 years in your state, people have to get together and talk about curriculum. This creates a special board, a special commission that's going to be deeply invested in these groups and making sure that representation is strong in curricular materials. Essential understanding, I'm just going to point you to these. These are amazing documents. This is from the National Museum of the American Indian. These are large concepts. Any teacher can pick them up off the shelf. If you're working with your students, teachers, or you're a teacher yourself, I highly recommend you access these as a beginning place to do better in the classroom. And so if a teacher's saying, well, I need more stuff for, this, and I know you're an Indian parent, then you say, well, it's kind of up to you to do this work, point them to this. This is an amazing document, it's an amazing resource, lots of lesson plans there. Montana, these are ours, we have essential understandings. So does North Dakota, Oregon, South Dakota. They're growing, people are doing them all around the country. There's no reason they couldn't be done in Colorado. It sets a baseline of information for teachers. So again, they feel like they have enough, the door is opening. We're giving them the basics about what they can and should teach about American Indians, and hopefully, that gives them an entry point. Not going to go into this because I'm out of time. I've talked about it. Wait, I'm not done. I gotta say something about this. And this is because I think, again, those traditional methodologies that we employ to teach our young people can benefit all students. any student in this country. And so there's a lot to learn about Indigenous ways of teaching and knowing. Some of these, again, are things that teachers do anyway, but others, allowing ample time for mastery, public demonstration of knowledge, teaching, emphasizing observation. All of those are essential to teaching about American Indians and teaching American Indian students, and it benefits everybody. We're not thinking sharing. Here are a few resources. We'll leave this up for, we'll put it back later when the panel's over. And then there's Thank you very much, Mandy. And if everybody can give Mandy one more round of applause. I'm going to introduce our panel, and I want you to know we asked these 5 individuals to be on our panel. It was a tough decision. We have a lot of really talented and dedicated and extremely intelligent members of our community, so it's hard to narrow it down. And we really are hoping that this conversation is just one of many as we proceed. But I want to go ahead and introduce, and their bios are in the program, so I'm not going to have a long drawn introduction. But I would like to introduce Phil Gilbert, who is the Indian Ed Director at Adams 12 5-Star Schools. Rose McGuire, who is the Director of Indian Education at Denver Public Schools. Chris Nelson, who is an Associate Professor at DU and also a parent. And Lisa Harjo, who is a longtime educator and is not working in the field of education right now, but she has written several books on the subject. If you guys, the panelists, just want to kind of come on up as I'm talking. And then Maya Padilla was unable to make it tonight, and so Rosie Molina has graciously agreed to fill in, and we're lucky to have her. And she attends John F. Kennedy, which is my alma mater. I graduated from there a long time ago. Way before Rosie, for sure. Okay, and Mandy is going to moderate for us. I think we're waiting for Rosie. So, thank you all. I think that was like, a really quick introduction. Do you want to take just a minute more to say a little bit about yourself?
I'm Rosemary McGuire, and I'm a tribal citizen of the system of Washington, Oneida Nation in South Dakota. I'm the director of schools, the director of the Native American Student Support Program.
Hi, my name is Rosie Molina. I'm a junior at Donnell-Kay High School, Southwest Denver. I'm a Seminole Muscogee and Choctaw. I'm part of the Native American Student Support Program and have been since elementary school. I'm also a Genetics Fellow and a student partnership with the Charter, so I'm really happy to be here.
Hello, my name is Chris Nelson. I am an assistant professor at the University of Denver. I'm also a parent to Olin, who is 8 years old and attends Dulles County.
Piche, Stonewall, Chavachika, Lisa Harjo, Choktak Bigaway, Anhalikek, Anhalikek. My name is Lisa Harjo. I'm a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, and I sit with the Secretary. And I'm very honored to be here and be invited to be here tonight. I was formerly the director of the Denver Indian Center and can remember this place from before the day it opened. So it's really an honor to be back and to be part of the event tonight. Thank you.
My name's Phil Gover. I'm Pawnee and Choctaw, Oklahoma. I grew up in Oklahoma. I have 2 children. They're actually members of the Oto tribe, but they're also Kickapoo. They're in 6th and 8th grade in the Abstel schools, and I'm happy to be here.
All right. So I'm sure, like many of us in the room, there are stories and realities that test us, test our resiliency, and often give us pause. But I thought we'd start tonight with a question for everybody. It's more strengths-based. So for everybody, and if you don't want to answer, you can certainly pass the mic down. There are more questions to come, so that I'm not letting you off the hook. But what does success look or feel like for yourself as a student, for your own children, for people of the community? What does success look or feel like for Native students?
This information I got from our students because I will ask that it's not my statement about their success. What they say is I'm successful because I'm resilient and I have a tribal identity and I have an educational plan and I can bounce back to whatever occurs in my school system. And I'm going to be a leader in my community. And this information comes from my youth as well. And another thing that we did a survey with our students last year, and actually, it's almost similar to what I just told you about the success of our students in Denver Public Schools. They were really supportive of wanting to be their extended family is most important in their kinship. Shared sense of collaborative community, responsibility, and pride. They wanted to have generational wisdom and knowledge about their tribal nations. And they want really survival skills and resiliency in the face of multiple challenges. Those coming from our students, they are telling us how they can be successful.
This is a hard question. I think for me, as a Native student, as a young person, as a student in DPS or Denver, success looks like to me of knowing where I fit in my community, in the society, in the world, in the country, but also success looks like, knowing my part, but also like what do I contribute to the world and what does the world contribute to me, and how can I make my community and the world around me a better place. I think that goes to the same thing with my peers. And I think one thing that we're focused on right now is like where do we fit in and where are we a part of, and I think just like success looks like feeling that they belong somewhere.
I guess I'd have to agree with whoever spoke already. In my experiences, I think it's really important. Success is caught up in a really strong self-identity, being able to learn and master what you want to, being able to take care of yourself and your family, and being happy. And so from a positive point of view, I think those things are really great and great indicators of success. And I'm sorry to say that many of our students don't realize all of them while they're in school.
I think, and what I've been trying to, I guess, do, and what I have in mind, is I think of this in terms of my own children, and what it will be where I'm comfortable that when I leave, I know that they're safe and good. And that's really how I look at this. For me, because of even what I know I've gone through, I can see successes. I want them to be happy, first of all, and foremost. I want them to be happy, and I think that happiness can come from that when they go home, they're comfortable. That when they go there and they're within their own people, there's not this feeling of, I live away and I'm so different than you. That there's this common conception that they also have as anyone else who's from home. And also within that, though, I think it's a success when I can have my own children realize that the knowledge that we have as people and had as people and that we're trying to bring back is just as powerful, if not more so, than the knowledge sometimes that they're being told is what they need to succeed. I want them to know that as Pawnee, you look at those star charts, you look at these traditional concepts and ideas, they are basically physics as we understood the world. And it's something that's just as powerful and as understandable and actually understood at a level that may be greater than what the physics and physics people, the scientists, understood currently. That there is this knowledge that we have in who we were that will carry you in a modern context. It's not something for then, it's for who we are and who we will be. And to me, that's when we really have succeeded, because it won't be dependent on anything other than who we were and who we can be.
Rosie, Chris, and Phil, you either are in school or have students that are in school. Can you tell everyone a little bit more about that experience as a Native student or a Native parent in your local school or district?
This is a tough question. I think, like, as a Native student and growing up in traditional public schools and in the community that I did, that I went through a really big identity crisis, or like not really knowing who I was, not because of like support at home, but mostly because of in school. And I think that with the help of Native American Student Support Program, I really like knew myself as like being an Indigenous person and who I was, because growing up with traditionally like Mexican cultures or Latinx cultures, it was like who am I and who do I become? Do I be like this person who lives on this side of me, or do I be the person who I'm growing up around, or who I'm living with, or is it bad that I don't speak Spanish, or is it bad that I don't know my Indigenous language fluently, or, you know, who do I become? And like, it didn't really help with the fact that my teachers called me by, you know, the wrong terms, that I was a savage, or that I used to be, or my ancestors were. And like it has been spoken of tonight, the teaching of our cultures and peoples in our history classes have not helped me in any way. I think that everything that I learned about my people and the history is at home. And so I'm very lucky and grateful to be in a family of educators who to work with students. And if it hadn't been them, I don't know what I would be thinking right now. But I think that as a Native student, it would definitely be like a way and how do I show my Indigenous cultures at school.
As I mentioned earlier, my son is 8 years old and he's in 3rd grade at Acres Green Elementary School, which is in Douglas County. And so if any of you are familiar with Douglas County, it is definitely a white space through and through. One of the things that was really unique about his school that we realized is that it is actually pretty diverse for being Douglas County. But with the representation really there is of international students where their families are here on work visas. So he is getting a different sense of diversity. And a lot of the families are from India. And it's really interesting whenever we start talking about India versus American Indian or Native. And for him, I know that at the school, we've never met anyone that is Native there. I reached out to the school to try to ask for support, to see if the school district offers anything. And they were actually really confused as to what I was talking about. They just had no orientation of like, what do you mean Indian Ed program? Because their first inclination was to think Indian Americans or a lot of our international populations here too. And for my son, I know it's challenging, right? Because he doesn't see who he is. And whenever he is engaging in conversations around Native representation, he is learning how to speak up for himself. It's really an undue burden that we put on our kids. And it's really unfair because, he went to History Colorado for a field trip and they have an exhibit. And, just the typical Indian teacher doing her best as she can asks my son, what do you know about this? And he just kind of looked at them like, that's not my tribe, that's not my people. And the fact that, at the time he was 7, he had the know-how to actually say that that's not who I am. It was really powerful for me, but it was also made me very sad. Because that's like the same experiences I had, 35 years earlier, kind of thing. And so for him, it's still a lot hasn't changed. One of the things that I have done in the past, and this is something that I encourage other parents to do, is every year, whenever we start a new school year, I send a letter to his teacher outlining certain aspects. One being talking a little bit about cultural appropriation, Halloween costumes, about race-based mascots. I talk about, of course, the Columbus Day versus Indigenous Day, and Thanksgiving. And I also mentioned, specifically that he misses a lot of school because our homelands are in New Mexico, so we go back a lot. And to not dismiss that as us being disengaged from the class or from the learning environment, but that there's multiple ways to learn. And I'm more than happy to share that letter because it's been shared widely, because it's a labor of love, but I also know that I'm in a privileged space being a professor and being able to know the language that educators use, and knowing how to cite references and things that are very accessible, but being able to do that for our community is really important. And I've shared it widely with a lot of different of my colleagues and close friends, so if you're interested, definitely feel free to reach out to me.
I need that letter. It's been, and I have to agree with what I said here in dealing with the school district I'm in, in that we don't even have an equity department. We have a group now, they're starting to call it, it's interesting because they brought this term up, people of color, because I haven't heard it since probably late 80s, early 90s when I was in college. But it was interesting because this is how it views from being the Native advocate in the school district. This is, I live and die with my students because these are who I was. I went to a big school in James, Oklahoma, and even though Oklahoma, you can go to any Walmart, 25% of you are native. The thing is, in the teaching of it itself, and the educators and the faculty and the staff, there was very few native people. I happen to be fortunate in that actually Perry Reaper of a Creek Nation was my football coach, and he had a staff of 5 native guys that coached the football team. It was kind of a remarkable thing, considering it was one of the major schools. But you go around the halls, and when I go to eat at lunch, it was myself, my brother, there was another guy who was Creek, there was a few of us, and of course you almost get numbers. You're in get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we would sit at the table and everyone else was white. And that's what South Tulsa looks like. It's very similar up in Adams 12 in that way. So when we have these people of color meetings, and you bring in all these different types of people for this meeting, and you get about 10 people in a district that has probably 1,000 people working for it. The other end of it is, it was created so we could show leadership for the rest of this, because we couldn't get positions. And I know, actually, the assistant principal that works at AIAD, Gerald Montour, applied and couldn't even get at least a chance to come in and express who he was in our district. And yet, all the highest administrative level people, hardly any of them are people that we could even relate to. And that is the thing I always hear from students. And when I do these K-5 programs, I have to go district-wide, pick up students, bring them together just so we can be a group of 10 to 15 students that are all native, so we just kind of be who we are and how we want to be when they're the only one at any particular school, and definitely in any class. And the thing that I was trying to teach these students is to become comfortable in who they are and their identity, because they still got to deal with all the things of being a boy as he grows up, or a girl growing up and being interested in boys and girls, being interested in this, trying to learn how to study habits, all the other things that the other students deal with. I need them to be secure in who they are as a cultural people and that background, because if you start to do it in high school and you're going through all of those things while also trying to do all those other things, it's hard to get in the AP class and do really well. It's not going to be an indication that we're not capable. It's an indication of I'm handling 40 things you don't. And with our families who live in a place like Adams 12, that you become homeless because they keep raising the rent, but your pay doesn't go up in the job that you're doing. And then you're traveling to get there. Both of you are working, if you're lucky to have the 2 parents. And then the teacher's like, well, why aren't you engaged? You didn't come at 5 o'clock for the parent-teacher organization meeting. Well, because I work from about 6 a.m. until about 6 p.m., I'm happy to just kind of be here with my kids and get some rest before I go do it again. That's kind of how it looks in the district that I feel like I'm working in. And that's just the big struggle. And it does bother me that when you go to the gifted talented schools, and we actually had a student from DPS who went there, but had some other things, something that they leave because they're handling way more, and the school kind of feels like, well, they have these other issues. But it goes towards that thing. If you're in the gifted talented school, you're supposed to acknowledge the fact that there's some gifted talent. I have tons of friends, incredibly smart people who just didn't give a damn and were bored out of their minds at school. Hey, you could be in advanced English. Why would I do that? That's just going to work. I'm not going to do that. Smart enough to recognize what hoop you want me to jump through. I don't need to do it. That guy went on into the Navy and became a nuclear engineer, but he wasn't going to do these things. But we have students like that, but on top of that, dealing with the culture. And then they're selectively picking who they see gifted and talented because, well, they're also really good in classes. They really are good in classes. Look how good they do things, and they do it just right, that you're meeting a standard of some kind of middle to upper class white America. And our students don't do that. They don't come from backgrounds like that. And in Oklahoma, you learn how to tease, and you tease very hard, and then you go into a non-native community, you start teasing somebody, and then think you're being offensive and just being mean. It's kind of what I grew up with. Going through Oklahoma schools, I went to schools in Washington State, and then now I'm here in Colorado, and I see the same thing. And it is something like you say, 35 years ago, and I hear the students say the exact same thing I recall. And it hasn't changed. But I understand why it hasn't changed. I go and I see a teacher who feels like, hey, I went off to college, and I'm back here, and I'm teaching at my same school. I go, wait, where'd you go to college? CU Boulder. You didn't go anywhere. You're telling me you're so diverse because you went to college, but you went to the same people and came back and you dealt with the same people you grew up with and you want to tell me you can understand my students who just moved here from primary. You can't. But the only way to get around that is to be willing to have diversity in the schools and deal with someone that you have no clue what they're thinking or saying. But I don't see that with this administrators, because John Von Turk can tell you, if you can't even go in and do an interview, how are you going to even change who you got there?
Chris, your letter is famous. I think there are people in Oregon that are using it. It's good. Rosie, I just want to tell you, I think collectively, everybody in the room, your honesty, it's incredibly brave, and you're talking about things that have been hurtful and damaging in your life, and I think you just have some of the faces out there that are hopefully committed to helping fix that, so that other kids don't have to face the same experience. I want to talk a little bit about teachers. The reality is the Native teaching force is very, very small in this country. We hope our own programs continue to flourish and thrive, but until those numbers are up, we have a predominantly non-Indian teaching force. So for anyone really, but maybe in particular Lisa and Rose, what would be your advice to teachers? What resources might you point them to? What would you say about decolonizing education, being more culturally responsive?
The word decolonized education, we haven't been able to do it in 100 years. So I would mention that to the teachers, that this is a long phase of decolonizing education in Western society. But I also I'm not going to speak out of this, but my experience has been with teachers in Denver public schools. And the schools that we service, we have team members here tonight, and we do have Lakota language in our district. We have 3 classes in high school, and our Lakota language teacher is here today, and she's really, has installed not only the language, but the culture as well. And as far as teacher education, mentoring teachers, I think we need to redefine culturally responsive education. When I talk to teachers about it, it's always very physical. It's not in depth about our culture. It is, well, I do this in a classroom, but I said, well, you think about it, is that really teaching culture of our native peoples? And most of it is really, as you know, I taught several years, so I know what teaching about culture is and how responsive you have to be. So I think in DPS we need to redefine that. What is culturally responsive education? And I also would recommend that they check in with our community, our native community, and figure out where our people come from, and where they are, where they live, and what nations they belong to, their students as well. We have some schools that are really, really excellent about doing that, but we have schools and teachers that are not so, they're kind of reluctant to do that as far as reaching out to our community as well. Okay, I just want to mention one thing about equity. When I first came into this job, which was several years ago, I didn't see any of our native students taking AP courses, honors courses, or concurrent courses at all. We had one student at one of our so-called distinguished high schools in the district at the time, and I looked at his scores as far as the state, his SATs, and he was off the board. And he had not taken an AP course. Never. And many of our students are not doing that, but our team is really digging into that and making sure our students in the AP course. In fact, his father is here tonight, Eric. And so this started there, and he went to MIT, but Colorado School of Mines, and he graduated with an engineering degree, and I think bachelor's as well. And this really hit me hard. Those low expectations our schools were having of our students.
Thank you. I guess what more I could add is that I know from the time that I worked in Indian education, which I can't really say is stopped, it's a continuous process. When I worked with Rose in Denver Public Schools, I did a lot of the teacher training for teachers within the district, and I did the class about American Indians, and I was overwhelmed. I did these little surveys at the beginning, and one time I thought I should put a thesis on it because it was amazing how little everyone knew. And so I really think that, like what they do in the state of Montana, I was part of actually the original law education process up there, where they required teachers to actually take classes about American Indian history across the nation, within the state, and the tribes local to where they teach. And I think that if teachers knew more about what they were teaching about, they would not have to do a special added-on class about American Indians. They could actually use us as the examples for commerce, industry, every example of anything in history. You could use an example from an American Indian tribe. It's not done because teachers don't know them. So I think increased teacher training and exposure to American Indians, because I found a lot of teachers who really had that feeling that because we're so invisible in a large metro school system, that we're not alive anymore, and that they take their kids to the museum and they learn about the Indians. I worked and lived in Denver for a long time. I used to teach at the art museum. They have us come in and then they bring in third graders or fifth graders, and we do our little talk. And I would bring in students from the preschool here at Denver Indians. I'd show them my clothing, and I'd show them ball sticks, Choctaw ball sticks, and so this little boy would show us his dance outfit. He danced grass dancer. And so a few years later, my husband said, well, let's take Skyhawk back to Oklahoma, and he could stay with us for the summer. So we took him down there, and we went out to our tribal ceremonial grounds. And we have like arbors around a central area where we dance. And people hang out during the afternoons and visit, talk with each other. And I kind of saw the boys from the other side of the room, or the arbors. And they were running from arbor to arbor, and they were grabbing the sticks off the arbor. And my husband and I just smiled at each other because we knew they were gathering the kids to go play ball. When they got to our arbor, they said to that young man we brought from Denver, they said, let's play ball. And he looked at me, looked at those kids, and he looked at the sticks. I thought I only did that at the museum, he said. Because even he, as an Indian boy, raised in an urban setting, had been taught that Indians were of the past. And so I think we really have missed the mark of education for all, and that if we did a better job of that, that it would improve the lives of our Indian students, especially when they're one in a school or one in a classroom, and they don't get that critical mass like they possibly could have in the new American Indian school.
So we do need to wrap up, but I thought we would close with just one question. We'll just have a little bit of time to answer for everybody. What's one thing that comes to the top of your mind that a school, a teacher, a group could do to improve Indian education? One thing.
I'm sorry. One thing is, I think our teachers, administration, counselors, all people that are educated, our young kids, they need to form relationships with their students and get to know them. I mean, that's the most important thing, not only their culture, knowing their family, knowing them. I think that would be the most rewarding thing that could happen in our schools.
I agree with that very much. The next thing that comes to the top of my head would be to talk to your students, or talk to your young people, or the Native youth in your community, or just around you, because I think that you can create something really great for them and then not even like it, really understand how it's helping them, or maybe they would have something to change about it. And so I think that really talking to your students or your young people, they are your future, we are the future, and so I think that getting their input really changes a lot and it helps with them wanting to grow and become themselves.
I think what Rose mentioned about relationships is super important. But I also think it's also an important aspect for the teacher to do a lot of self-reflection on how they even shape their relationships and understanding their own history and their complicity, being complicit within a settler state of how they benefit from colonialism, because then that really forces an individual to reflect upon how they enter a space and how others might be entering the space as well too. It's, to me, very surprising how often a lot of non-Indigenous folks have never thought about it. One of the things that we do at Margaret College of Education, it's kind of also tied into this previous question about what can teachers do, is to really shift how educators are trained in those spaces. So this past summer, all of our faculty read the Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States. And it was a push from a few of my colleagues that really wanted to help shift that narrative around what indigeneity means and this idea of the land acknowledgement that we're often hearing. But a lot of it is self-reflection, I think.
I guess it was good that Rose went first because she really said an important thing, relationships. I think if teachers help young kids feel like they belong, that they can do anything, and so I think that's a really good place to start.
Yeah, this is the worst part, being the last one on the line. Because relationships are huge, and I totally agree with the recognizing your biases as teachers, self-reflection. I think it is really huge to recognize. Because I did, and real quick, this is the reason why that one's very big. We had a student who wanted to put face paint on. She went to the school, she came in with it, I think you might know who she related. And the principal immediately, like, oh my God, it looks like those gang signs. Brian, hey, you can't do that. It really bothered her because she's like, hey, I'm coming into this whole Western cultural entity here and I can't even be who I am. I feel like I need these markings to protect myself. So I came over and I talked to her and said, hey, go talk to your folks because I know who your folks are and they're going to have great reasons. The grandparents, but also go pull up those photos so you can show why it's culturally appropriate. They came back, I had to take care of something else, they had come to an agreement, which was great. About 2 weeks after that, I ran across the principal again. He said, hey, Shane, you come back in wearing these things, and she kind of said, wait. I go, calm down. I go, here's your issue. I go, do you not recognize that painting your face is a cultural phenomenon across the world? He goes, well, yeah, but if they go too far out with the things, I go, wait, hold on. The fact that white women put blush on and do these things with their eyes, do you not think there's another culture that said, that's crazy? And I think you finally got it. Like, you've made a cultural decision on what's appropriate based on your culture. The issue's not face painting, it's painting it in the right way. And I think he finally got it. I mean, that's what it's like to be Native. That's what those folks are. Do you not think we recognize where those things are? And that's that self-reflection. I think it is. I guess that is a cultural. Yeah, of course it is. If I come into your culture, you want to ask me what I have American studies background. Do I know about Americans? Of course I do. I'm a Native person who has to live it and recognize it all the time. and also try to retain who I am. So I think it is important for teachers to self-reflect because you don't recognize all the constant frauds. The other end of it, the only way you're going to do that is through, I think, the relationships and recognizing those cultures. But ultimately, what they need to recognize is that self-reflection and those relationships means anything about Native culture and this Indian education thing is good for all people. This ain't about just one culture. It's about you recognizing people throughout the world. So every time I talk about this, it ain't just about helping my Native student. It's about you helping yourself be a better person. And so none of this is just about you helping my kid. So I'm trying to help you. I have pity on you.
Thank you all. Not easy to do, but important. And everything you've contributed, I think, gives us a much richer and fuller picture, rather than me just up there blabbing. You told stories and brought it to life. So thank you so much.
Okay, I just want to add my thank you to our panelists, and like I mentioned before they all came up here, we have incredibly talented and dedicated folks in our community that have been working on many of these issues for years and years. So we really appreciate their participation tonight. I want to thank you again for coming. Please don't forget to fill out your evaluation form. And I'm going to turn it over to Matt with DK just to have a final thank you. And thanks again, everyone.
Just wanted to get up here, and there was a lot of people to thank for a lot of the work that went into this. So we've done a lot of names. Just again, I'd like to thank Terry for all the work that she has done pulling this together. We have Alicia Lucero, Jennifer Wolf, Desiree Ortega, Bill Bover, Cheryl Montour, Rosa Blair, and Karen Mortimer did a lot of work here as well. And also, just one last time, I'd like to thank Rick Waters for opening up this beautiful space for all of us here this evening. You guys have all shared your emails and contact information, and I think what we're going to do is we'll ask Mandy if we can get those slides that she put together shared out. And it is more conversations come up. When we asking, we'll just put information out to folks and kind of hope to continue this conversation in a meaningful way. And really appreciate all of your time and all of your patience and just this evening.
Just really quick, I also wanted to thank Sherelle Lang and also Ernest House, who are both Mountain View tribal members. And Sherelle, she drove all the way up here from Towak today just to be here, so I wanted to thank them for coming.